Hi, my name's Neil Munday, and I'm your host for the Sterling Business Podcast. The podcast is brought to you from Studio King Street here in the heart of Stirling. You can book our wonderful studio by going onto our website and making a booking that way, or sending an email to inquiries@studiokingstreet.com. Or you can simply pick up the phone and give Laura a call to make your booking. So, over to this week's episode of the Sterling Business Podcast. So, Stuart Preston, founder of Okal Astronautics, welcome to Sterling Business Podcast.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
So, thank you for making the trip over to Stirling today, to our studio in Studio King Street here. So, the first question I'm going to ask is, are you an astronaut?
I am not. I'm an engineer.
Right, okay. We've got that one clear. So, thanks for coming along. I think it's fair to say you've got a very interesting business proposition and business that you've taken to market, which we'll hear all about.
Yep.
So I'm keen to understand your background and how you ended up here. But why don't we just start by you telling the listeners and viewers who you are, Stuart, and what your background is before starting Okal Astronautics.
Sure. My name's Stuart. I grew up quite locally in Menstrie. I went to Alpha Academy and joined the Air Force. That was my main role. I did 16 years in the Air Force as an aircraft engineer. And as part of that, I travelled the world. I did a lot of, tours in the nicer places in the world, like America and things like that, but also did things like the Middle East and Afghanistan. I then left a few years ago, went to a major bank to sort of broaden my horizons a little bit, and then went to a large defence firm as well to really get my teeth into being an engineering manager. And then that's where I sort of started Okal Astronautics.
Right, okay. So what does your company do? And how did you end up working in this exciting sector?
Well, that's a longer story. So I grew up on a farm. My dad was a farmer, and I've always had that sort of connection to nature. I loved climbing the Okal Hills and things like that. But I went on, I've always had a love of space. And whilst I left the Air Force and went to the bank and the defence firm, I was kind of like, I want to do something for myself, and I kind of brought everything together, my experience of engineering, my love of nature and things like that, and ultimately that love of space. Okal Astronautics, we're an ag tech firm, so we're developing systems to grow fresh food. Ag tech, so agriculture technology, sorry. Should expand. So we're developing tech to grow fresh food anywhere, so extreme environments, that's like Frontline and even up in space, hence the name of the company. It comes from my background from deploying to places like the Middle East and Afghanistan, where you're having to eat food repetitively again and again, and it starts to hurt your morale, hurts your performance. And so what I would have loved back then was access to, being able to pick fresh food for myself and possibly even choose what I want to eat, rather than being handed like, you have to eat this and you have to eat this. That's kind of the ultimate story of why I started the company.
Okay, so how long have you been going for now?
Just about 2 years. Not quite, but yeah, coming up on 2 years.
So you're beyond the kind of startup mode. I guess you're now scaling, are you, in terms of the business?
We're kind of still a startup. I started the company when I was still working full-time for the defence firm. Those early days, I was kind of trying to get my head around what is a company and how do I run a company. I'm not from a business background at all. Doing engineering has always been my passion and all I've done. So I had to get my mindset right. So I did some accelerators and things like that with like Barclays Eagle Labs. Mm-hmm. So those early days were slower. We didn't make a lot of progress. It was just about me learning how to run a company. But now the past sort of year, definitely the last 6 months, it's been a real, like, we're going. So we're still at the startup stage, but now we're looking like, right, we're ready to scale.
And how does your team currently look in terms of scale size?
We're still a small team. There's 3 of us. I'm the only one working full time at the moment.
And the dog.
Yeah, so 4 of us, sorry. I shouldn't forget the dog. So there's myself working full time as the CEO and like chief engineer. We have Matt who helps on the science side of things. He's a biologist. And we have Laura who's doing the marketing and operations sides of things. And then Jet, who's our people relations officer.
Great. And how did you come up with the name?
So it's actually from growing up around here. Like I said, when I joined the Air Force, I moved away. That was sort of age 19. But I've always had a connection. I always obviously come back. There's family here and things like that. But the Okal Hills is where I grew up. But then I was climbing them every weekend. I love the area and I want to move back here. So at the moment, we're based in Glasgow, but we will move back here once we have a sort of first funding round in place and things like that, because space isn't at a premium in Glasgow, but space has a high premium. So it'd be great to move back to Stirling and actually bring some of this industry, the space industry, to Stirling, because I feel like there's not a lot of it in Stirling.
Okay. Well, maybe we can have a conversation at some point about establishing yourself in number 45 King Street.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so your website defines you as a hardware engineering company. So what products have you engineered and developed, and what does the pipeline currently look like for you guys, if you can share that?
It can. So it's on the website. We've got a few products. But we're underpinned. So we have our plug and play plant pods. So these are plant pods that have our growth medium in them, are seeded, and they're delivered as a unit. They are backed by our support systems. So at the moment, our main product that we do have is Rugged Garden, which is a portable and personal food growth chamber that you can carry around with you.
It almost looks like a pet carrier, right?
Exactly. We built it to be sort of kind of suitcase sized. Like I said, my background from the military is like, right, can I picture myself Bergen rifle and take my garden with me on deployment? Because that's what it's for. It's you pick what you want to grow. That's why these plug and play plant pods exist. Is right. I want to grow tomatoes. I want to grow chilies, but you don't. You want to grow basil and lettuce. You like a nice green diet, so you pick what you want to grow. Rugged Garden, we've built that out. Botanic Sky is our space system that we're beginning to develop. And then all of that is supported by firmware that we've developed, and then we've got like an accompanying app as well.
So it's all underpinned with with it. Did you call them the plant pods?
Plug and play plant pods.
Yeah,
we need
it's all underpinned by that, but you've got different use cases and different types of engineered devices, boxes, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, that's it. That's my background, is the engineering stuff.
Oh. Okay, so you mentioned a couple of sectors there. Frontline in terms of military, and also space. So where are these products typically used, and how are they used in those different examples?
Yeah, so we're still getting through the sort of customer acquisition stage right now, but what we see is the Rugged Garden unit being used at the front line, also possibly disaster zones and things like that, where people have less access to fresh food. Because of the automation, you don't need to know how to grow a plant. The system does it for you. You just have to pick it and eat it. Watch it grow if that's it, because that's the morale angle from it. The Botanic Sky application, which is, like I said, space is where we want to be. That is going to be used by astronauts. We're looking at sort of planetary surfaces, so the moon and Mars, and those journeys to Mars. And those are the discussions we've had with space agencies, is that these are long missions and we can't rely on prepackaged food. We need to be able to grow food on the way.
Mm-hmm.
That's the application for those.
And is it a crowded marketplace, this? I wouldn't have thought so.
No, there's a few operators out there, but the majority of it is research based. So there is food already growing on the International Space Station, but most of it is research based. It's determining how things grow in space, do they grow, and what's the best things to grow. What we're looking to do is kind of commercialize that. And yeah, it's really not a crowded market, but that also makes it a difficult job for us in determining what's our value and how do we advertise that to investors. It's a tough call.
Well, and to potential clients, right?
And clients, yeah, definitely.
Because I would have thought, given the kind of nature of where you're going to be, putting some of this product, I would have thought it'd be pretty highly regulated as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, military and space are very similar in that there's a lot of regulation around it. And luckily, that experience of being in the defense sector, both through my career and then at the defense firm, I understand it. I understand the amount of regulation around it and how to navigate that. But there's a lot to get through. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. And from a, I guess it's all about growing fresh and nutritious food in for the most extreme environments.
Yep.
Do you have any plans to branch out into other areas outside of nutritious food in extreme environments?
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be, for things like Mars missions and things like that, we're looking into what kind of support systems they need around that, and how to store the food. You grow, like say we're looking at growing lots of tomatoes and things like that. They're not going to eat all them immediately, and then there's going to be a gap where you grow the next batch of tomatoes. So we need to look at storage of that.
Refrigeration.
That's it. Yeah. And there isn't much of that at all in the space industry yet. So there's more challenges to meet around that.
But there lies the opportunity, right?
Correct. That's it. Yeah. I think there's a lot of opportunity for commercial entities to get into this market.
Yeah, I suppose you're probably pretty limited in the battlefield because you don't want to be carrying a fridge as well as a...
No, exactly. I mean, they already do. Like when you look at like sort of forward operating bases, main operating bases, they do already have that refrigeration, sort of like containerized, isn't it? So there is that opportunity, and that's why it's more of a personal experience when we're looking at the Frontline. It's your portable garden that you grow yourself rather than scaled up.
Which custom...
Yeah.
Custom grown for you, basically.
Exactly. But with the space market, that is a completely different beast for us.
And how do you even get into a conversation with a space agency to try and sell them your product?
A lot of networking.
Yeah.
When I first started the company, I was like, I don't even know what I'm doing. How do I start this? And luckily it was through Barclays Ego Labs. I was first introduced to you get a champion once you've finished their programs. So I did the veterans program. They give us the space champion, and he just knows everybody. I don't know if I'm allowed to name drop or anything, but he knew everybody, and he's like, right, you need to come to this event, you need to come to this event, and it was just starting to chat.
You don't think of a banking institution being completely networked in terms of the space sector, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's his passion, definitely. Yeah. He loves it, and it's because of that, and it's how he's integrated himself into the industry. He knows so many people, and he's like, right, Stuart, you need to speak to this person. Stuart, you need to speak to this person. Does the introductions.
It's not what you know.
Yeah, exactly. And it's built up to the point where, we were doing, I was speaking on a panel at Spacecom Glasgow, and I met the Chief Health and Medical Officer of NASA, and then that sort of kicked off that conversation.
Okay.
And then we went to Florida as part of a DBT mission to Space Commercial Week. And I met so many people there, and that's where like the balls really started to start rolling.
Wow. And are some of these partnerships or these ecosystems that you kind of, these networks that you're building, are they starting to formalize? Or are you starting to create a supply chain of such, or a value chain?
Yeah, that's the biggest thing about these shows in the space industry, is getting to know all the suppliers and who can possibly help you out in terms of contact and things like that. And yeah, the ecosystem I'm building around the company is what's going to sustain us for a while, I think.
And I guess probably the biggest focus for business like yours would be large investment in R&D, research and development.
Yeah.
That typically comes with deep pockets, I guess, right? And looking for investors.
Yeah.
How are you kind of approaching the investment side of what you're trying to do to scale?
So initially, like you said, having not been in business, I thought, right, I need to contact every single VC firm out there. So it was spray and pray, hit all the VC firms, and they all said, no, you're too early stage. What is your tech? Do you even know? So I kind of rolled it back a bit. And we've luckily been supported by an organization called Pira International, who gave us our first kind of call it seed funding. It was an R&D commercial grant, and that managed to kick us off. That's sustained us. That's how I'm now full time, and we're now in that round again of right. We need investment, so it's now a more tailored and focused approach to finding investors who are focused on the space industry or ag tech, and are looking to get into our small bit of the space ecosystem early on, and that's the key difference now, and that, that's from a learning point from us, is making a focused approach and picking out the investors you need to speak to rather than spray and pray and just.
And how's that going in the early days?
We're getting more callback, which is good. There's more pitching rather than straight off nope. So there's more pitching going.
So they're listening to you.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. They're beginning to focus because we've now built a product that we can show them. It is winding up and getting a bit better.
Right. Okay. So where do you see the business in? I guess it's such a fast-moving sector, right? Space in particular is, but I know you're addressing other sectors as well. But where do you see the business in, say, 3 years from now? What would you like to, if you were looking back at the headline, what would it say in 3 years from now?
In 3 years, we'll be one of the primary suppliers of food growth tech to the space industry. We'll have a much bigger team. I want to grow it to at least 20 by next year. We need that. It is quite.
And where would that investment typically go into? More research?
Areas. It is research and manufacturing as well. We want to build these products quite quickly. It's all about iteration. There's commercial space stations going up in the next few years. The whole plan from NASA is get to the moon by 2030, having boots on the moon again permanently. And going to Mars isn't that far off either. So we need to iterate quickly. And that comes from my I've always enjoyed lean and things, and it's all about iteration. Is we need to research this and build quickly, fail fast and learn and get something out there that works. And that's kind of been our approach the past 6 months, is like, right, let's build this.
So has it taken 2 years to bring the first 2 products to market? Or has it been a bit longer than that? I guess what you've been trading for a couple of years.
Yeah, well, that's it. We've been trading for 2 years, but I think the products have really taken shape over the last year. We threw something together extremely quickly to get to London Tech Week last year.
Or a rapid prototype idea.
Yeah, and it was rapid. Since then, and we learned a lot of lessons from that prototype. It's now we're still iterating quickly, but it's more focused iteration on like, right, this didn't work, let's change this, let's bring in these. There's a lot of commercial off the shelf items that we're using, but it's bringing in the right things quickly.
Okay. So if there was a kind of an ask of the business community out there, there's lots of investment, as we know. It's all about kind of finding that, and obviously, pricking the conscience of somebody that's interested in the particular sector that you're building in. But is there anything you'd want to ask of the business community at this stage?
I think it is. So at the moment, we're in a sort of scale up shared workspace in Glasgow called Stack. The reason we're in there is they have some incredible facilities that we can use, like a mechanical workshop and a media lab, things like that. I'd love to see that in Stirling, and I know that's what you're building here, because, like I said, this is somewhere that I feel connected to and I want to have the company operating in. But it's make a bet on the startups. With some of the people I know now and that I work with in the startup community, we're doing some really cool things really quickly as well. Leveraging AI and things to help you scale quick is, there's some really cool tech.
I was going to ask you about your application of AI and how you've started to use it.
We use it with our software a lot. I mean, I'm a hardware engineer. I worked on aircraft, pulling out boxes, putting them in, fault finding, working out electrical faults and things like that. Software was never my thing. So I've had to very quickly learn how to write software. Leveraging AI has sped that up massively. I mean, I could have waited to start the company and spent 6 months trying to learn software. Nah, you know what? Let's just build it. We'll build it. I'll code. Hey, AI model, does this work? And they'd be like, no, there's an error here. There's an error.
I guess, in today's age, we're not doing waterfall project management, anything like that anymore. It's all agile. So you have to move quickly and you have to adapt and you have to change. And, MVPs, we used to call them, minimal viable products, fail fast. I think you used that word earlier on. So I can imagine in your sector, you've got no time to lose. You've just got to...
No, that's it. I mean, because, we said, like, there's not a lot of operators in this small part of the ecosystem, but there could be. So it's about getting there first and getting something out there and getting that customer acquired that, like, here's our MVP. Let's work together and let's build the next version of this.
Yes, develop it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and have you... you talked a little bit about manufacturing earlier on. Have you got a plan to scale that at this stage? How would you do it? Have you got
there's no
factory process?
That's one of the things that I've been trying to build over the last sort of 6 months is that ecosystem of suppliers, like trying to work out who can do what, who can build what for us. We're looking at producing PCBs and things like that for this, and it took me a week to build the enclosure for our portable rugged garden. I can't be spending a week or weeks trying to build multiple of these units. I need a supplier to be able to build that for us. So,
and how do the power? Are the solar powered, or how do we get power to these gardens?
Yeah, so at the moment it's mains powered with batteries, but yes, eventually solar power is going to be the way forward because we are talking about operating in disaster zones, frontline, things that you're not always going to have access to mains power.
There's probably going to be a lot of sun in those areas, and
exactly. Well. So it's not going to be a massive change for us, really. Adding solar into a system with batteries already it's not difficult.
Okay, good. Well, thanks for coming along. Where can the audience find out more about Okal Astronautics?
Our website is great, but our LinkedIn my personal LinkedIn is next level. That's where they do a lot of sharing of what's going on in the company. We have our sort of news blast and things like that.
You talked about blogs, so I guess there'll be trends, what's happening in the sector, and
that's it.
I guess development.
Our little newsletter works, and we are bringing out an email newsletter as well, and we'll share more about our food, not just the engineering, but the science side of the company as well.
Great. Sounds exciting.
It is.
Good luck with it.
Thank you very much.
It's a really, really interesting sector. Very topical at the moment with what's going on with the latest mission as well. So, so thanks for coming along, and hopefully we'll see you a bit more permanently in Stirling sometime in the not too distant.
Fingers crossed. Cool.
Thanks, Stuart.
Thanks, Neil.
Take care.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
So that brings us to another end of an episode of the Stirling Business Podcast. Thank you again to our guest this week. Remember to follow us on the YouTube channel, on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Until next time, stay safe.